General Hospital spoilers reveal that the confirmation that Peter is still alive has shaken Port Charles to its core, sending shockwaves through every corner of the city and unraveling whatever sense of security its citizens thought they had. For years, the name Peter August was spoken only in whispers, if spoken at all, associated with betrayal, manipulation, and a spiral of terror that left emotional and physical scars on nearly every character who crossed his path. His supposed death had allowed many to breathe again, to rebuild their lives free from his suffocating influence. Maxie, perhaps more than anyone, had struggled to reclaim her sense of self, to find stability for her daughter Bailey Lou, and to live without constantly looking over her shoulder. But that fragile piece has been obliterated. Because now, the unimaginable has been confirmed: Peter is alive. And Maxie's disappearance, far from being a quiet retreat or a temporary leave of absence, is in fact a calculated and deeply personal abduction. The man she once fled from has returned. And this time, he is not asking for love, he's demanding it. The details of Peter's survival remain murky, but the rumors paint a picture more disturbing than anyone could have predicted. Whispers suggest that he did not die in Anna's arms years ago, but was instead rescued in secret, possibly by Jerry Jacks, a man with a long and bloody history of meddling in life and death. Jerry, whose alliances span international black markets and hidden laboratories, is rumored to have orchestrated Peter's revival as part of a larger, more insidious plan involving psychological warfare, political destabilization, and advanced behavioral experimentation. That Peter may have spent the intervening years not in hiding but in training, being sharpened by Jerry and others like Professor Hank Dalton, only intensifies the dread. This is not the same man Maxie once loved. This is a weapon molded by obsession and revenge. A man reprogrammed with one purpose: to reclaim the family he believes was stolen from him. Maxie's abduction wasn't spontaneous. It was the result of months, perhaps years, of surveillance, of manipulation, of waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And Peter chose his moment well. With Spinelli distracted, with Mac and Felicia focused on the chaos surrounding Anna and Valentine, with Bailey Lou finally beginning to find normalcy, Peter stepped into the breach. And in one silent night, he took them both, Maxie and her daughter, vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and raw fear. The impact of their disappearance has been seismic. Spinelli, always the anchor in Maxie's life, has collapsed into near madness trying to find her. He's exhausted every system, broken every firewall, and tapped into networks he promised never to touch again. But the silence remains. There are no ransom notes, no digital fingerprints, no sightings. Just absence. Mac Scorpio, devastated by the loss of his daughter and granddaughter, has poured every resource at the PCPD into the search. But every lead turns cold. Every witness recalls nothing. The trail is invisible because Peter planned it that way. Felicia, too, is slipping, her instincts scream that Peter is behind it all, but with no proof. She's forced to watch helplessly as her family unravels. Meanwhile, those who believed Peter was dead now face an even more terrifying reality: he was never gone, only dormant. Anna, who once made peace with the guilt of her involvement in Peter's life, now must confront the consequences of not ensuring his death. Her connection to him, one forged by lies and blood, is back at the forefront, and she knows better than anyone what he's capable of. Valentine, too, finds himself shaken. He had tried to love Peter, to mentor him, to believe in his redemption. Now, that decision may cost him everything. The entire city is gripped by a renewed paranoia, a fear that if Peter could come back from the dead, who else might follow? But Peter's return is not about Port Charles. It's about Maxie. Everything he's done, surviving, rebuilding, hiding, has been for her. His twisted mind has rewritten their history. He no longer sees himself as the villain. In his eyes, he is the wronged lover, the devoted father, the man whose family was ripped away by betrayal and misunderstanding. And now, with Maxie in his grasp once more, he intends to make her see it too. He isolates her, controls her surroundings, feeds her half-truths. He talks about Bailey like they were never separated, like their family has always existed in this hidden space. He tries to convince Maxie that Port Charles never truly loved her, that Spinelli abandoned her, that her parents were always too busy chasing chaos to protect her. And in moments of quiet, when the weight of captivity becomes unbearable, Maxie begins to wonder if Peter has truly lost his mind, or if he's always been this way, and she simply refused to see it. But Maxie is not the same woman she was before. She has endured too much. She has lost too much. And though Peter may control her movements, he does not control her will. She begins to plot. She watches. She listens. She learns. She knows Peter is too careful to leave obvious clues, but she begins to test his boundaries. She starts asking questions. She begins leaving subtle traces, scratches in furniture, hidden symbols, broken objects placed deliberately in the background. Messages only Spinelli would recognize, if he ever finds the footage. She's not just surviving. She's fighting. Quietly. Patiently. Meanwhile, Port Charles descends into chaos. The lack of closure, the absence of a body. The mystery of her disappearance, it all becomes too much. The media begins speculating. Conspiracy theories take root. Some begin to question whether Maxie fled voluntarily. Others point fingers at Spinelli, at Felicia, at Valentine. Distrust grows. The PCPD fractures under pressure. Sonny begins to take personal interest, offering resources of his own. Even Carly, long removed from Maxie's orbit, begins to question the narrative. And then, a clue surfaces. A piece of surveillance footage. A shadow in a doorway. A partial fingerprint. Suddenly, the impossible becomes undeniable. Peter is alive. The reaction is immediate. Spinelli breaks down. Anna collapses under the weight of guilt. Valentine demands answers. Felicia screams in rage. But none of it matters. Because Peter has already gone too far. He has Maxie. He has Bailey. And he believes he has won. But obsession is a fragile thing. It feeds on silence, on isolation, on fear. And Peter, despite all his planning, cannot control everything. Maxie is watching him crumble. She sees the cracks. She sees the fear he's trying to hide. He knows she does not love him. He knows she never will. And that knowledge is beginning to break him. His control slips. His temper flares. And in those moments, Maxie sees her opportunity. She begins planning her escape, not just for herself, but for Bailey. Not just from captivity, but from the ghost of the life Peter tried to force upon her. What happens next will not be clean. It will not be quiet. When Maxie moves, it will be violent, chaotic, and final. Because she knows there is no version of her life where Peter remains alive. Not after this. Not after what he's done. And when she escapes, when she brings Bailey home, she will bring with her a storm that will tear through Port Charles, through every lie, every false peace, every broken promise. Peter's survival may have reignited the obsession. But Maxie's return will be the reckoning. Port Charles has faced darkness before. But what's coming is different. It is personal. It is raw. And it will not end with Peter's capture. It will end with his erasure. Permanently. And Maxie, broken and remade, will stand at the center of it all, not as a victim, but as the survivor of one of the most disturbing obsessions the city has ever known. The truth is out. Peter is alive. Maxie is missing. And everything is about to change forever. Spinelli was never a man easily shaken. His mind, a finely tuned machine built on algorithms, logic, and obsessive attention to detail, had always helped him remain calm even as the world around him collapsed. But this time was different. This time, his world was collapsing. The disappearance of Maxie and Bailey wasn't just another mystery to be solved, it was a waking nightmare, a vacuum of noise and panic that no amount of code or surveillance could fill. He had tried to rationalize it in the beginning, telling himself there was some explanation, that Maxie had gone off the grid voluntarily for a personal reason. That Bailey had been kept safe under her care. But with each passing hour, the silence grew heavier, more suffocating, until it became impossible to deny the truth he feared the most. Maxie hadn't vanished, she had been taken. And if the whispers now creeping through the alleys and institutions of Port Charles were true, then it wasn't just any man who had taken her. It was Peter. The man they had all believed to be dead. The man who had stalked, manipulated, and broken Maxie once before. The man who had destroyed everything in his wake and still somehow clawed his way back into the world. Port Charles was no stranger to chaos, but this was different. This was resurrection. A ghost made flesh. A nightmare returning with skin and breath and a plan more disturbing than anyone dared imagine. Spinelli couldn't think clearly anymore. He ran over every message, every signal. Every security loop. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. His fingers trembled on the keyboard. His mind spun out of control, looping endlessly between guilt and dread. He had promised Maxie she would be safe. He had promised her that Peter was gone, that the monster had been buried. And now he had failed her. Failed their daughter. Failed to see the warning signs. And the worst part? He had no idea how deep it went. Because just as Spinelli began to collapse under the weight of his powerlessness, a darker truth began to emerge. Peter's survival wasn't just an accident of fate or a freak medical miracle. It had been orchestrated. Hidden. Protected. And suddenly, all eyes turned toward the most unexpected return of all, Britt. Her reappearance had already stirred quiet confusion among the citizens of Port Charles. She had been gone too long, too quietly. With no explanation. Her sudden arrival back in town, brushing off questions and dodging emotional contact, had initially been seen as odd but forgivable. Now, in the wake of Maxie's disappearance and the rumors of Peter's resurrection, it seemed ominous. Too well-timed. Too coincidental. And those who once embraced her return began to question what secrets she carried with her. Spinelli began to dig. And what he found chilled him deeper than any security breach ever had. Britt had disappeared off the radar around the same time rumors began circulating through the darkest corridors of international intelligence circles, whispers of a failed assassination. Of a body recovered but never accounted for, of a name that had resurfaced in encrypted files, Peter August. And attached to that name were coded correspondences linked to another familiar presence. Jerry Jacks. It wasn't just that Peter had survived. He had help. Britt's help? Maybe. Maybe not directly. But if she hadn't resurrected him herself, she had crossed paths with someone who had. And whether she realized it or not, her return had triggered something. A shift in the wind. A pulse in the atmosphere. A clue that the nightmare wasn't over. As this revelation began to ripple through town, Port Charles reacted with a level of collective dread it hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just that Peter was alive. It was that his presence, quiet, hidden, but active, signaled something more terrifying, a new era of destruction. One built not just on obsession, but on vengeance. On reformation. On the idea that Peter, in whatever form he had returned, believed he could reclaim everything he had lost and rebuild it in the image of his madness. And the fact that Maxie and Bailey were now gone confirmed that this wasn't theoretical. It was already happening. Spinelli, now fully unraveling, couldn't breathe without seeing Maxie's face. Couldn't speak without hearing Bailey's laugh in his ears. He started going to places she had been. Sitting in silence at the park bench near the playground. Visiting her old apartment. Just to feel the space she had once filled. He coded through the night, scanning for any blip that might suggest location. He tapped into satellite feeds. Called in favors from cyber units he had once left behind. But Peter had anticipated him. The trail was clean. Too clean. And that was the most terrifying part. Peter knew how Spinelli worked. He knew what Spinelli would look for. And he had erased every trace of himself. Meanwhile, Britt found herself at the center of a storm she hadn't expected. Confronted by suspicion. Haunted by the weight of Peter's legacy, and unsure whether the shadow of her past had followed her back to town or never left, she began to question what secrets she had unknowingly carried. There were gaps in her memory. Places she had been, people she had spoken to during her absence, some of it didn't add up anymore. She started to remember strange moments. A hospital in a remote village. A man she never saw, kept behind heavy glass, hooked to machines. The code name in her hospital logs, Subject 8. She had dismissed it. But now she wasn't so sure. As Port Charles braced itself for the fallout, those close to Maxie began rallying, Anna, Valentine, Felicia, even Sunny. The city knew the signs. They had seen what obsession could do. They had seen what Peter could do. And with Spinelli fraying, with Bailey's safety in jeopardy, and with Britt now tangled in a web she may have helped weave. One truth stood above all others: Peter wasn't back to haunt the city. He was back to claim it. And if Maxie was his beginning, she wouldn't be his end. This isn't just a return. It's an apocalypse unfolding slowly, quietly, under everyone's nose. And with each passing day, each failed lead, and each haunting silence from Maxie and Bailey, the people of Port Charles begin to realize the horror has only just begun. The obsession, once buried, is now reborn. And what comes next will be the reckoning. The sudden departure of Kirsten Storms from General Hospital has left fans reeling, especially as it directly aligns with the shocking on-screen disappearance of her character, Maxie. While initial reactions ranged from surprise to concern, it's now clear that this exit is not just a temporary absence. It's part of a much larger narrative shift that is sending Port Charles into chaos. Maxie's vanishing has been officially confirmed within the storyline, but as details remain scarce, viewers have begun to suspect that her exit may be tied to something far more sinister. And if rumors are to be believed, that suspicion is not unfounded, because Wes Ramsey's return as Peter August has now been confirmed. And with it comes the full resurrection of one of the darkest chapters in GH history. Wes Ramsey's Peter was presumed dead, his twisted arc supposedly ended in betrayal, blood, and justice. But as longtime fans know, nothing in Port Charles ever stays buried. The return of Peter marks not just a character comeback, but the revival of a deeply psychological and morally disturbing storyline that had haunted the canvas for years. With Maxie missing and Peter re-entering the narrative, the signs are clear. General Hospital is plunging headfirst into a new era of psychological warfare, manipulation, and trauma, reigniting fears that many thought had been laid to rest. This isn't simply a case of a villain returning. It's an evolution. Peter has come back with purpose. With strategy. And, most disturbingly, with obsession. It is no coincidence that Maxie vanished just before news of Ramsey's return hit the press. The writers have woven a storyline that is rooted in emotional terror. Built upon a man's inability to let go of the family he believed was stolen from him. Peter doesn't just want revenge, he wants restoration. And in his twisted worldview, the only way to heal is to rebuild what was lost, even if it means forcing Maxie and Bailey Lou to comply. What's unfolding now is not just a recast or return, it's a seismic adjustment in the tone of the show. A recalibration that proves GH is willing to return to its most harrowing material to push its characters into darker, more dangerous places. Kirsten Storm's departure allows for this reset. It opens a narrative vacuum that Peter can fill with fear, with control, with calculated malice. It allows Wes Ramsey to reintroduce Peter not just as a threat, but as a catalyst for the complete unraveling of the moral and emotional fabric of Port Charles. Spinelli's breakdown. Felicia and Mac's desperation. Anna's guilt. Britt's possible complicity. Every character tied to Maxie is now dragged into the nightmare Peter has created. And as he manipulates from the shadows, the audience is forced to consider how much damage he can cause before anyone even knows he's back. His obsession with Maxie was never simply romantic, it was pathological. It was rooted in abandonment, in delusion, in the belief that he was entitled to her love, her loyalty, her child. Now, with no one prepared for his return, he has the upper hand. And the longer Maxie remains missing, the more control he gains. This storyline also underscores a deeper creative shift within GH, a willingness to lean into long-form psychological horror. To allow its villains to operate with subtlety and menace rather than spectacle. Peter's return is not about spectacle. It's about silence. About watching. About slowly isolating Maxie until she forgets what reality looks like. And with no one able to find her, Peter is building a new world where he controls the past, present, and future. Where he rewrites the trauma he caused as if it never existed. Where he forces Maxie to become the partner he believes she was meant to be. And while Maxie's physical absence is explained away on screen, viewers know that behind the curtain, it's part of something more ambitious. Kirsten Storm stepping away from the show creates the space to allow Maxie's voice to be muted, something Peter would certainly want. The silence becomes part of the horror. The lack of scenes, of perspective, mirrors Maxie's own isolation in captivity. The audience feels the loss, just as the characters do. And when the truth of her fate is finally revealed, the emotional impact will be devastating. Wes Ramsey's return also presents the opportunity to explore new layers of Peter. How has he changed in exile? What resources does he now possess? Who helped him? What has he learned about control, about silence, about fear? And most importantly, how far will he go this time? If his past reign of terror was unrelenting, his second coming promises to be even more destructive. He's not returning as a man in love. He's returning as a man in control. A man who has waited, watched, and planned for the moment when everyone let their guard down. The implications stretch beyond Maxie. Bailey Liu, still young, still innocent, is now part of this psychological battlefield. Peter's intentions for her are unknown, but if his obsession extends to family, then Bailey could be used as leverage, as a tool. As the centerpiece in his delusional belief that they are destined to be together. And while the town mourns Maxie's absence and debates Peter's return, Bailey's safety hangs in the balance. The threat is not just emotional. It is existential. The return of Peter, enabled by the exit of Kirsten Storms, is more than just a twist. It's a full narrative explosion. A shift that exposes the fragile illusions of peace that Port Charles had been clinging to. It destabilizes everything. Every secret. Every alliance. Every character who believed they had finally escaped their past. With Peter back, the message is clear: no one escapes. No truth is permanent. And no trauma is ever truly buried. As Britt's reappearance now seems suspiciously timed, her potential ties to Peter's survival, whether direct or accidental, will likely pull her deeper into the storm. She may know more than she realizes. Or worse, she may become one of the only people capable of navigating Peter's warped mind. Her past sins, her ties to the Westbourne legacy, and her own struggle with identity could all come into play as she tries to unravel the truth. And whether she chooses to help the town or protect herself may be the difference between salvation and catastrophe. In the end, Kirsten Storm's departure has opened the door for something far more than a temporary absence. It has allowed General Hospital to elevate one of its most haunting villains into a force of narrative destruction. Wes Ramsey's return as Peter August isn't just about revisiting old wounds, it's about making them bleed again. And with Maxie missing, Bailey endangered, and Port Charles falling into panic, this story is no longer about a single obsession. It's about the ripple effects of unchecked delusion, of systemic trauma, of a town that let its guard down too soon. The explosion has already begun. The fallout is only just beginning. And as the truth comes into focus, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear: Peter August is not done. He's just getting started.